1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, Infinity! Part 5. I recently took offense when a close friend shared words that I felt were both anti-equality and spiteful, and after pointedly but politely calling him out on the matter, I decided to incorporate the theme of advancing equality in a letter to my son and to tuck my thoughts on the matter in the birthday card I sent to him. What follows is part 5 of 7 segments of my birthday epistle to my elder of 2 children and the father of my grand one. Everybody knows that most everyone born before 1946 was a square, and that everyone who came of age between 1960 and 69 is an ultra-cool rebel hipster, right? I mean, us baby boomers came out of the womb with protest signs in our hands, love beads around our necks, and pupils that cartwheeled like psychedelic kaleidoscopes, right? Yeah, just like that. There were some really important changes that occurred between your grandparents' roaring 20s and your parents' hippie 60s. Straitjacket restrictions, rigid binary, yes or no, on or off thinking began to soften around the edges, and a little deeper, if more wishy-washy perspectives began to take hold. A lot of the binary was designed to define, but a lot was designed to control. Binary is easy. I mean, early computers could do binary, but as with the vast majority of things in this world, life is more complicated than a yes or no checklist. Reform and revision was in the air. I like to proclaim that I'm old. I mean, I get to say I'm older than Vatican II, and it's true. While prep work for Vatican II, the reform of the Roman Catholic Church, began with Pope John XII back in the summer of '59, before I was born. Wasn't that summer memorialized by Bryan Adams? No? Missed it by what? 1 decade of the Rosary? It didn't officially get underway until October of 1962, and V2 officially lasted 3 years, ending in December 1965. In response to the Protestant Reformation, modernism was declared the enemy of the Church and blind faith her bestest ally. An ally that had a mini come-to-Jesus moment with V2 when Pope Paul VI, the first pope that I remember, unveiled the new revealed truth that momentous day in December 1965. While I don't remember Mass being celebrated in Latin, I absolutely do remember the absolute condemnation of the Jews as Christ killers and the damnation of Jews being stated explicitly during Good Friday Masses 3 days before Easter back in the day. And by back in the day, I don't mean 1965. Obviously, anti-Semitism regarding Jesus' crucifixion goes back as far as John 18:28 through 19:16, or at least back to medieval days when fine, outstanding Christians needed money to go retake the Holy Land from the Saracens, and these fine, outstanding crusaders had to borrow money from Jewish bankers because, you ready for this? It was a sin for Christians to charge interest on loans, but it was okay to borrow money from Jewish bankers who could collect interest. A fine workaround until we remember that the good Christian crusaders would smile and nod as the Jewish bankers were subsequently run out of town, tortured to death, or came to other, they had it coming, bad ends. If you think that's inaccurate, you are mistaken. If you think it was oversimplified and a bit hyperbolic, I'll plead the fifth. Vatican II did a mulligan, a redo on the DFJ model, and told everyone to calm down, everyone, calm down, just like our favorite descendant does. I don't know if the printers were too backed up to get the newly updated post-V2 missalettes out to the millions of RC parishes worldwide, or what caused the delay, but I absolutely remember standing in my pew chanting the refrain that basically said, "They done it, now string them up," in reference to the Jews and their descendants in perpetuity, who told Pilate to crucify Jesus and set Barabbas free. The bit of audience participation that regularly led to upticks in violence against Jews and desecration of synagogues all around the world. Thankfully, this congregate refrain was soon replaced with messages more in keeping with the universality of human brotherhood that V2 stepped towards. Was that one small step for a pope, one giant leap for Catholic kind? If the church was ripe for change, what of the secular world? Things were happening. Good things that included steps towards a greater inclusion of brotherhood between races and religions, but also the inevitable blowback from those reared in hatred and tied to the status quo. little things happened. Things like the 24th Amendment that abolished poll taxes and literacy tests the year before V2 became the law of the devout, an amendment to our Constitution that once again was supposed to bring greater equality to those of a darker hue. And when that proved inadequate, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act in 1965, and then the 26th Amendment that lowered the voting age from 21 to 18 years of age in July 1971. Wondrous things that were met by traditionalists who knew then, just as traditionalists know now, that the old ways are the good ways, are God's ways, and must be perpetuated. Traditionalists like Charles Manson, who on July 1st, 1969, shot Bernard Crowe, who Manson mistook for a Black Panther, a group that Manson felt was his right and duty to hunt and kill. What's that song from Fiddler on the Roof? Oh yes, tradition! And let's not forget the little stuff. Want to talk radical? In 1960, it became legal for women to open bank accounts all by themselves. No co-signing by daddy or hubby required. Then 1974 rolls around, and now women can have credit cards in their own names without a daddy or hubby co-sign? Where will it end? Certainly not with financial reform. Comstock laws, defined as any article or thing designed or intended for the prevention of conception or procuring of abortion, began to fall. In 1965, Griswold v. Connecticut said it was unconstitutional for the government to prohibit married couples from using birth control. Married women could get birth control? What next? Women demanding an era of equal rights amendment? An ERA would force unisex bathrooms. Women would be drafted. Civilization would topple. An ERA was proposed in 1923, a year that preceded the birth of 3 out of 4 of your grandparents. Came up again in 1971, and a constitutional amendment has come up nationally for years, including the 2020s. But our eyesight concerning equality between the sexes remains myopic, and we've no national guarantee of equal rights under the law for all Americans. Revolution of thought, acceptance of other, is never embraced by we who have been taught to judge, to vilify, to castigate, and declare inferior and wrong because they are not us. Emmett Till in 1955, James Byrd in 1998, and George Floyd in 2020 were killed because of the color of their skin. But of course, ignorance and hatred is not limited to skin or religion. Hatred is also visited on those who love outside the ordained order. People of different races marrying one another willy-nilly, or people of the same sex demanding to have the same right to marry that opposite sex couples do? Both of these changes occurring in my lifetime, and both being called into question by intransigents who proclaim they are standing for traditional Christian values. Values that somehow always favor them, rather than favoring equality and loving our neighbor as we love ourselves.